So welcome, everybody. So I'm a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering and part of the enterprise hub there. But my background is in computer engineering, and I've combined an academic and industrial existence. And in my industrial existence, I've had the good fortune of starting quite a few companies, which some of them done well. Some have joined the living dead, but still at a reasonable size. And for whatever reason, nothing's gone badly, but I have lost my shirt every now and then. So it's whether the company does well and whether you do well is not necessarily the same thing. And let me just say one thing about the Royal Academy of Engineering. The point is you get mentoring and there's no equity stake for it. Okay, so it's advice, talk is cheap, but it's from very experienced people. And that separates it from all the other situations I know where in some way there is a cut for the organization, whereas the Academy, as a matter of deliberate policy, not randomly, said not only will we be different, but we'll be better in line with the charitable objects that that the Academy has. So today we have this discussion about CEO, founder, same, different, and all of us on the panel have stories, experience, in other words, of this situation. So there are two very fine, very experienced people on this topic and many other topic. Suranga Chandratilake is with Balderton Capital currently, but he started a company or two himself in the past. And so he represents, to some extent, experience in the money side as well as other things. And we also have Heba Bevan, who is the founder and CEO currently. And when I say currently, I don't mean it's about to end. Is the CEO of Utter Berry. So if I could invite, first of all, Suranga to introduce himself, then Heba to introduce herself, say a few words of actual experience, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Great, thank you, Andy. So yes, I'm Suranga. My background is as a technologist. I have a computer science background. In fact, Andy was a lecturer of mine many years ago, and I think probably longer than either of us want to admit. And then since then, I spent years as an engineer and then eventually as a founder. So I started my own company called Blinks in the San Francisco Bay Area and was the CEO of that company for almost a decade. After having a really good run with that company, ultimately taking it public and running it as a CEO publicly for a while, I decided I wanted a change of location and sort of focus. I ended up moving back to Europe, to the UK, where I joined Balderton. And Balderton is a venture capital firm. We're based out of London, but we invest basically across Europe in early stage technology companies, typically at Series A. And we've been doing that for about 20 years. So we've worked in total with about 350 different founding teams in all of that time. And just as Andy says, we have a mixed bag. All of them have been ambitious, smart people wanting to change the world. Some of them have gone on to do exactly that. Others, of course, have faltered at various points during the journey. But that's the nature of the industry we're in and the reality of what company building is all about.
Right, now Heba.
So my name is Heba Bevan. I'm the current CEO and founder for Atterbury Limited. It's okay. And I hope I will be continuing my job for another period of time. So I founded Atterbury back in 2013. I'm an electronics and computer engineer by training and by basically degree. I used to design CPUs, central processor unit for ARM. And after graduation and worked on the Cortex technology for ARM, ARM moved me to California. So I worked as well in Silicon Valley. So that's another maybe something we are similar with Surinder, and basically what I did, I worked in Silicon Valley with all the major corporations, but with startups, and went back to academia and to Cambridge to do my PhD. And during my PhD, I founded Atterbury. And what we do is low power wireless sensor network with AI and machine learning. It's a sensor that provides edge computing. And thank you very much for having us, by the way.
Great. So let's start off with a position statement by you, Suranga, then by you, Hiba. You know, the good and the bad and the ugly of CEO versus founder, particularly some stories in your experience or something like that. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. So I guess I'll sort of address this in two ways. First of all, my own experience, and then also maybe some of the CEOs that I've spent time with, particularly as a VC. And so I'm an unabashed fan of CEOs, of founders staying as the CEO of technology companies. And the fundamental reason for that is that I think technology is such a fast-moving market and such a fast-moving industry that you need someone who strategically and deeply and viscerally understands what it is you're building and all the different players and all the different dynamics that are around that. Obviously, the more technical a company is, the more that is the case. But I think even in relatively less technical tech companies, if you will, that's still the case because actually the cutting edge moves so often that you need to have someone who genuinely understands it and kind of, you know, through training and through just wanting to be part of it is always up to date on those areas. I think that when you have more commercial CEOs, what you find, you know, sort of classic MBA CEO, is that they will come in and understand the business today, and they will often be really good at optimizing it today, and in fact, often better than a technical CEO at finding little things they can tweak. But what they're really bad at is the kind of paradigm shifts that actually happen surprisingly often in technology. I found that a little bit in my case. You know, we tried a non-technical CEO early in my company's history, and we found it really didn't work. The person involved was fantastic. He's a really smart person. He stayed on my board. I'm still a good friend of his, but he never really understood the twists and turns our industry was going through. And so, in fact, when I eventually decided not to be a CEO anymore, I was sort of careful to pick a technical CEO. But even a technical non-founder CEO, I think, doesn't always have quite the engagement with the company and the product that the original CEO did. The other thing I'll sort of mention is around CEOs that I work with today. Now, I work with some through my job at Balderton, but I also work with a bunch of very technical CEOs through the Royal Academy of Engineering, because I'm also a fellow there, and I mentor a number of the companies on the Enterprise Hub. And what I find a lot with those more technical CEOs, in particular technical founders, is that they really think that it was their job to start the thing because they understood the tech and the product. But now that the basics are in place, the rest of the challenge is commercial. It's about building a team. It's about selling. It's about marketing. It's about finance and all those sorts of things. And there's often this belief that they can't figure that out themselves. They can't deliver on that. And it's better to bring somebody else in to do that. I do believe that you should bring expertise in. So absolutely you should hire people around you who know those things. But I disagree with this idea that technical people can't do that as well if they want to. And so for that reason, I end up spending a lot of time trying to convince people that it's okay. You know, you may be technical. You may have spent the last 20 years of your life basically doing technical subjects and technical research. Doesn't mean you can't learn how a P&L works. Doesn't mean you can't figure out how to sell or market your product. So that's kind of my view. Just one final point I'll make is that despite all of those intentions, the reality is that CEOs do change. And so I did some numbers on our portfolio at Balderton before I came on the call, and it turns out about 20% of our companies have switched CEO from the founder at some point in their journey. But interestingly, the data would suggest that while there's no black and white truth, on average, founder CEOs end up taking the company further and delivering a higher return of investment to the investors. In other words, the exit is more valuable. So, I mean, it's not black and white. Like I say, there are some really good exceptions in both cases. But to me, it just further underlines this idea that if you really want to build a technology company in particular, having a founder who really understands the core product and the core tech will give you the best chance of kind of ultimate success.
Very good. Thanks, Suranga. Hiba.
So when I graduated from electronics and computer engineering, I was 22, and during that time, actually, I worked during my undergrad completely with ARM, and when even working in Silicon Valley and seeing lots of ventures and new startup happening from tech people. So tech people brings ideas, and these ideas and innovation, it comes in from founders, basically have them. The person who understands the technology can take it further, bring a wrong, and I've seen it many, many times, bringing a wrong CEO who does not understand or appreciate the technology, actually push it really, really further. I do agree with you. You have to surround yourself with certain expertise, with certain people. And one critical thing is listening to others, listening to the people surrounding you, to the engineers. I often come into my technical team and my engineers telling them, oh, we're going to start this, and we're going to start that, and we're going to do this product and that product. But to actually collectively listen to them very, very, very closely. How long is going to take us? How can we get this product to market? What is the roadmap for it? Can we actually achieve it to a way to bring in money to the company? How can we actually boost the company's platform? And we are providing a technical solution, not just a solution. I really don't want, as a company, as Atterbury, I don't want us to be a company that provide a normal tech. And literally what I would like us to provide, and we are, as a company, we've been doing that for the last 7 years, providing an edge technology tech, which is very unique. We are very proud with our patents. And I don't think if today's time, if we bring in a commercial CEO, would understand what we are doing, because it's so you know, JP Morgan expert, or somebody who've taken small ventures to larger corporation, or went through all the stages of A series, B series, C series, raise funding. It would not actually help the company. It will probably disturb it in a wrong way. So the way we are working today, and I do believe in, if the company providing very unique technical and technology, we really need a founder who is a CEO to lead that portion, but as well listening to experts around them, because I would say I'm not the most expert in P&L and making great commercial decisions. However, knock on wood, most of the commercial decision that we've taken is been very positive. We've been positive cash flow from day one. As a company, we generated a profit even in our first year. We're keeping our growth between 30 to 40% every year. So what I'm using is using targets and using the facilities that I've learned in engineering to make it as an engine, to step by step, how can I build that engine to enlarge my capability and enlarge that performance, and how can we actually have the growth that we need to provide a better service, a better technology to our economy.
Very good, Heba, thank you. So even though I'm chairing, I'll do my little bit here of a sort of introduction, and then I'll go back to chairing and perhaps play a slightly deliberately contrary role, because we're all lined up in some broad sense that the CEO should be the founder. But nevertheless, let me say that in my case, the sort of reasons that I'm just speaking as sort of a panel member rather than chair, you know, high-tech engineering is not vanilla, it's not ice cream. And so the founder is very, but I have that, whatever high-tech that is. And that will keep on changing, and that you've got to adapt with respect to what both the technology, reality, the hype, the competition, the market, and positioning to investors and so on. And a CEO who has a deep engineering thing in their blood, in his or her blood, is very appropriate. And my experience is, okay, that's a positive side. Many of my companies, well, all of them have had some kind of a down at some stage, some more significant down where I got kicked out, well, diluted out. I've never been kicked out actually, but diluted out, so there was no point, so you might as well go. My view is that you've got to have either the CFO or the CEO who understands engineering. So when you make cuts, you don't shoot yourself in the foot because there might be an up. So you're savvy, not just purely financially driven, spreadsheet driven, that this is going to be cheaper, therefore we better do it, or whatever. There's some nuance required there. In my experience, the CEO has sometimes got it, but one of the CFO and CEO should have it. And in the case I'm thinking of, actually, the CFO had a engineering, heavy engineering, high-tech background, but became a financial person primarily. So that was good. The next thing is, but you need a partner. You need somebody in the business, or somebody who you can bounce off, who is more either commercial or has complementary skills. It takes two to tango, in my experience, without that, it's a pretty big ask to find a person who is really an all-rounder, meaning from the commercial right through the high-end engineering. So CEO engineer, great, but somewhere high up, a partner, or very close to the top, somebody who has complementary skills, which may be to do with perhaps being a little more stable, dare I say it, a little less eccentric, or different kind of experience, something like that. Let me finish off because this might be kind of interesting to people. So I've just a little bit of experience, which is don't try and follow what I've done, which is to try and simultaneously do academia and innovation by startups. So I've done 13 companies. And I managed to get away with it, but don't treat that as a model. It's very hard to mix academia with industry on both sides. On the academic side, the requirements for instrumentation, how many papers have you written, are out of control. And on the industrial side, on the company side, you better be there. You better have a presence if you're going to be CEO. So in my experience, I was only CEO of all those companies, one, which was an industrial research lab. So that's a particularly unusual situation because there is overlap. In all the others, initially, I was the high-tech partner, research director, technical director, that sort of thing. That's what happened to me at Acorn, for example, the precursor to Helm. And later on, I've been chairman, which is, again, a different role. It's not the CEO role, but I tend to protect the CEO rather than fire them. So they're high tech. So that's a little bit of experience from me. So let me now go to sort of asking a few questions. Let's start off with, well, the two of you, but let me start looking at Hiba, if I might. How do you winkle out where the founder actually isn't suitable? They're kidding themselves about what they're trying to do. They mean well, but actually it just doesn't line up. They're not so driven. Do you think that's an issue? And how would you let that person become a founder, CEO?
I think the data and the revenue shows that. So if the company grows year on year and approve that it's achieving certain numbers and is going on a scalability and having not too much hiccup, that means basically the CEO is doing their job. If there is the company is going backwards in some ways, or is not providing the growth that is expected, or having not the same expansion or the visibility that is providing, that's an evidence as well of a failure CEO. So that's two things which is actually very tangible to understand. Successful CEOs versus CEOs, which are struggling CEOs. Of course, for both, I think as a CEO, you struggle a lot and you have to put in many, many hats, and you have to agree from day one. You will be, the day one when you open that corporation, you're the HR person, you're the marketing, you're the sales, you're the engineers who is doing the patents and filing it, you're the one who is creating diagrams and logos and ideas, you're the one who is speaking with your client, you're the one who taking the full and understanding the full pictures to that view. So if you have a CEO who does not know that vision and not able to actually express that vision, and I would say certain companies are luckier than others. So for example, in Icon, ARM actually was very, very lucrative in terms of the foundation of it. 12 very capable engineers put together with a lot of money to create what that came out to become an ARM. So that it's the first big issues on, oh, where the money coming from? How can we hire people that is being taken away? Where if you are an organic kind of companies, Atterbury is completely organic, you have to do some sacrifice. Oh, do I buy a house? Do I buy a new car, or shall I spend that money in funding my new venture and taking the risk? And I think as somebody who took too much risk in the beginning when I started Atterbury, and until now, you actually push the company to the best because you want to see the fruits of your work. You actually work very hard. You believe in what you're doing. You are completely in touch with every single point, with the engineering, with the financial, with the HR, with everything. But in the same times, I think it becomes very dangerous that you can't kind of separate yourself when the company grows. So when the company actually started growing, you need to be able to detach yourself and giving some people the capability to do that. So we have right now in Atterbury a head of hardware, head of software.
What do we lose there?
Straight on another part of expansion of the company. So I think one of the key elements, listening to everybody and surrounding yourself with very intelligent people and hiring the right people that are able to help you in your journey. I'm sorry, probably I've taken too long.
No, that's just fine. Suranga.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to have this balance, and I think trying to spot when there's a challenge is key. The best founders see that in themselves. Sometimes people don't see it themselves. The way that we manage it as kind of professional investors is that we're really, really upfront about it when we go through our process. So when I talk to companies, I often say, look, there are many, many great companies that we will speak to who will be, who end up being great businesses, generate lots of value for users, for society, for the founders, for even the employees and even investors, but they won't necessarily be a good fit for us. Because of the nature of our particular business model, rightly or wrongly, we are looking for a very particular kind of company, one which is technological, absolutely, but which can scale incredibly rapidly and has the potential to be $1 billion or frankly, a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. We understand entirely that many of them won't get to that scale, but that's the kind of thing we're looking for. And so we're very open about that. And we have that conversation with the founding team up front. And we say, look, if we think we can help, and here's what we would do, and here's why we hope you would want to work with us. But bear in mind that if we go into partnership together, this is the outcome that we're really looking for. Now, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. But what we don't want is to be in a situation where you're pulling for something else and we're pulling for this, and it's just really bad for everybody. You know, everybody isn't getting what they wanted to get out of it. You feel pushed unnecessarily. We feel like, you know, the opportunity is being constrained and not growing rapidly enough unnecessarily. And you know, let's be honest about that before we go into business together, so we don't fall into that trap. And actually, if you do that honestly, and if you really look at the whites of people's eyes in that conversation, it works. And we've had founders who said, you know, we like a lot about you, but we're probably not the right partnership. And equally, we've said the same thing. Now, there are cases where you go into something and then it changes, right? People's circumstances change, the nature of the industry changes, and that's fine. I mean, that's you just got to be you've got to be a human. You've got to help navigate through those things, and we do that all the time. But I think that if you're honest about you know, what you want to achieve with your team, with your investors, with your employees, and so on, then you kind of set for yourself a bar and a standard of what it is you're trying to achieve. And if you know you're not hitting that, then you kind of know you're letting, you know, your side of the bargain down. Sometimes there are good reasons for that, in which case you can openly discuss it and figure out what the solution is. And other times it's just because it's not what you want anymore, in which case it may be the right time for you to move aside. I just wanted to also give a couple of examples of some of the things we've been talking about, because I always think that really helps. You know, for me, a great example of where a founder CEO is incredibly successful and a non-founder, especially a non-technical non-founder, was really unhelpful for a period is Microsoft. You know, for the love them or hate them, Microsoft was is an incredibly successful company that has dominated and influenced every aspect of the technology industry for decades. And Bill Gates really, with his founding team, built that. You know, Bill Gates is highly commercial, aggressively commercial, but he's also an engineer. He's also technical. And I think he really, really understood the industry he was in. He made a few mistakes, of course, but he made most of those decisions correct. When he handed over to Steve Ballmer, the company went through a really, really flat patch, sideways, arguably down. They missed a number of key innovations. And for me, that was a lot to do with the fact that they didn't have a technologist in play, or someone who really viscerally understood. Now, Ballmer had been with the company for a long time. He's a very smart guy. He's a very hardworking person and all those things, but he still wasn't able to lead that company. Interestingly, with the new CEO, Satya Nadella, since he's come in, the company seems to have refound its mojo. And now actually it's on the up again. It was, I think, the second company to go through the $1 trillion market cap barrier after Apple, and feels relevant again in a way that it hadn't done for about 10 years. Interestingly, Satya is, of course, a technologist. He's an engineer. He wasn't a founder, but of Microsoft in this case, but he's nevertheless an engineer. And I think, again, viscerally understands where they are and how that's changed. You know, what worked for Bill Gates in the 80s and 90s wouldn't work for Microsoft today, but the new CEO gets that. So I think there are good examples like that where you can see, you know, if you hire the wrong CEO, you can have real issues, even with a company with the momentum and domination and resource that Microsoft has. Another good example of where I think the company played it very well is Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg will be the first person to tell you that he does not like a lot of what comes with the CEO job and does not consider himself to be very good at it. You know, he doesn't like the people management side. He's not a big fan of the investor relations side. You know, I'm sure many of you watched the Social Network movie with the famous scene where he pitches Sequoia Capital in his pajamas and dressing gown. That isn't actually that far from the truth. So it gives you a bit of an idea of what the personality is like there. But the guy understands his product and he really understands the technology. Again, love them or hate them. You know, you can't deny his success. And, you know, if you think about some of the moves that he's made, things like buying Instagram for $1 billion when everyone else thought it was a silly photo app. Things like buying WhatsApp for $20 billion when everyone thought it was just, you know, another version of SMS. These things were criticized heavily at the time, but in time have demonstrated huge value, added hundreds of billions of dollars of value to that company. And these things were done because he's a real technologist and he's a founder and he understands what's going on in his industry. But because he understands there are other bits he's not very good at, he very, very early on put a huge amount of effort into pursuing and landing Sheryl Sandberg as his COO. And it's fascinating because she's a great example of, you know, exactly what Andy was talking about earlier, a partner. You know, she is a financier, she's an organizational guru, she understands how to run people, she knows how to handle investors. She can do all the things. You know, she is the yang to his yin, if you will. And they're an incredibly powerful partnership, which is why he knew that he had to have her on board. So I think that as a founder, you know, I'm always very sad when a founder steps away or steps down, because I do think you lose some of the magic that Heba was talking about. So instead, I'm always trying to work with founders to guide them towards and advise them to find someone who fills the gaps that they either don't believe they can fill or they really don't want to do themselves. If you find the right person for that, then you can both go a long way.
Very good. So let me now ask a follow-up question, and I'll go Saranga and then Hiba. So that's all well and good, but you have to deal, backtrack. Whether at the founder stage, angels involved, whether at stage 1 to round 1, 2, or 3, venture capital, in particular syndicated venture capital, more than one outfit, although there are some outfits which are cradle to grave, or when you're going public and you're going to be seen by a public market. That's at all those stages, but in particular at the earlier stages, that's the real world. And so how do you deal with others in the investment community who are saying, no, I want their money, I want a spreadsheet, because otherwise I don't understand, it's too risky, and they've got the money. So in some sense, you're trying to sell to them and get the money. So how do you deal with that where you've got a founder you believe in, but for whatever reason, others, it's not so much about that founder, they are in a different place.
Yeah, no, I think, so first of all, I personally don't like working with people like that. So, if possible, I'd avoid it. The good news is I think the investor landscape has improved dramatically compared to 10 or 20 years ago. I know when I started my company, it was near impossible to have that kind of conversation here in Europe. It's one of the reasons that we set it up, half in the US, and one of the reasons that we raise money from the US. I think it's changed a lot. So that's sort of one aspect of the answer. The other part is, look, what I always tell founders is that so first of all, try and find investors who genuinely understand what it is your product is doing and what your technology will do. They don't necessarily need to understand the detail that you understand. Probably no one will. Certainly, I wouldn't know, I know a fraction about microprocessor design compared to Hiba, for example. So I would never expect to understand all the details she would in her particular company. But if you don't have an investor who understands the impact of what it is you're building, then I think that's a problem. Secondly, don't always think that asking about money is a negative sign. I often ask for a business plan, and I often ask for a spreadsheet, not because I believe I'm going to tie you to it, or because I think that that's the exact future of what's going to happen, and I want to see profit in year 2, and it's got to be at this percentage or whatever else, but more because it's a acceptance of the fact that you are thinking about this in a commercial way, right? Because if you're thinking about it beyond just pure tech, then you're saying, I'm going to build a plan. I realize it may be wrong, but this plan is a way of communicating the fact that, I'm not just building tech, I'm building tech within a commercial context. And also it's a way of expressing your ambition, right? If that business plan shows rapid growth and rapid potential, or potential in the future, then I know that you're trying to do something really big. If it doesn't ever show that, then I get a feeling that maybe you're not that ambitious about it, which is fine, but perhaps not for me. So I always think that when people push back immediately on business plans and financial models, even at the very early stage, I always say, look, it doesn't need to be a very accurate one, doesn't even need to be a very detailed one, but let's talk about it. It's kind of like having a thing that we can play with together. And sometimes having a toy you can play with together is a great way to get to know each other and understand each other. And in the case where you meet an investor where it's not just that, they really want to nail you to this plan, then I think you've probably got the wrong investor. And it's probably time to look for somebody else.
Very good. Hiba.
So I'll talk about our experience. So in terms of Atterbury, we probably get at least three offers every week in terms of investors knocking, or venture capitals knocking on our door. So I would say we are quite in a lucky position in terms of that. Asking for money, yes, it's always so tricky how to ask for money. But the problem is to find an investor that believe in your vision. Yeah. So when people ask me first time, why do you, what's your aspiration? Where is your exit? And I said to them, I don't have an exit plan. I would like to build the biggest tech company in the world. This is my exit plan. So it depends. So to get an investor that believe in you are capable to do that, or your inspiration and your actually target, it's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's not going to happen next month, not next year. You're just going to work on it, and you're going to try to become the biggest tech in the world. And I think if you are limited on what you can do with your spreadsheet, it's sometimes eliminating. One other thing, as I said, for anybody who founded a business, they take risk on. And getting the right investor or somebody who actually take as much as risk as you are and understanding the risk, it's hard. So one thing, we have one angel investor within Atterbury, and the way it is, it's basically we show them we can grow 30 to 40% a year. It's not impossible. Actually, we can even grow way more than that. We don't have a sales team, and we are able to do this. And we've got the biggest client. We don't have a small client as a corporation, and as a company, we don't have a small client. But the way it's because we provide very unique services, and that is a unique technology, and the people we provide, they actually need that technology. So to do something meaningful that the society needs, and understand that it does have scalability. What you're doing, it's not another app, or is not another part of a gadget, is actually something that the society needs, and you believe in it, and you work every single day to achieve that. That is the main goal by itself. And if people with you and on board with you, and I think the main thing is to have a team that believes, that has the same inspiration as well, the same aim and goal that you're having. That's a key point. And to continue on it.
People might be interested in another story from me. So I co-founded and was chair of a company which actually was in location systems, so included hardware, and that means it's a little more expensive than a pure software play, but not as bad as wet stuff. And we raised money from angels, and actually right up to about 15 million pounds of angel ordinary shares was the funding, partially because the VC stuff was too expensive in terms of shareholding, and partially because it turned out we could do the 15 million. But the way I chaired the company, we'd have a board meeting, and it's all going great, no problem. But it's when something happens, in that case, it required wireless standardization, all kinds of stuff. I would repeat every other board to any angel shareholder that wished to turn up, and they got to see exactly what the board was doing. So, it was essentially open house to those investors, right. Which meant that when the company ultimately did well and went on AIM and all kinds of stuff. But when there was a bit of a down, we were able to handle those investors. And when we then said, we want some more money, here is the reason there's a 3-month delay. They were already structurally aware of, the way the whole thing was going, and were minded. It turns out they did it, but they were minded to listen and cough up because they had the story. Anyway, let's now move over to questions. What I'll do is I'll read them out, and then perhaps my colleagues here can have a shot at answering them, but I'd encourage the audience to now type in some questions in the Q&A box. So Anonymous says, could you describe the personal and work challenges faced by CEOs when they come into a business, and how to negotiate founders stepping down from management? So again, it's not quite in line with us, it's the other way around. How to do it right with a new CEO who's going to work with and replace the founder CEO. Any comments on that?
Maybe I'll have a go at it because I've seen it happen recently a few times. It depends a lot on the nature of the change, right? I was actually involved in one this year where the founder CEO, it was a sort of pretty unusual occurrence, but something sort of came out about his background publicly that wasn't known before. Given the market that he was in, it meant that it was sort of untenable for him to continue to be the CEO. And so unfortunately we had to replace him, and he sort of understood he had to be replaced. In that case, it was very hard because it wasn't something that he wanted to do. It was something that came very abruptly. And so he was on board with the change, but it wasn't like an easy, straightforward process. In a case like that, reality of how we had to do it. Luckily, we had someone who was the obvious replacement, who was already on the team, and so who already knew a lot of people. And it was all about really everyone getting very engaged and spending time together and talking about what the issues were and so on, because it was such a public thing that it was sort of made sense to address it that way. The other case is where you have someone who, has, and this is the case for me, for example, where I decided I didn't want to be CEO anymore. I wrote a long blog about this. If you Google TechCrunch Saranga firing yourself, you'll be able to read that blog if you want to learn a bit more about the detail of it. But basically, in that case, I had a year or so to figure out what was going to happen. And that's more the typical case. And I think the key things then are taking your time to find the right person, taking your time to be able to really test that person. So, hiring them as a COO or general manager of some sort, or a president, so they can sit alongside you and work with you, fully in knowledge they may get your position one day, but it's really a way for them to get a sense of the job and for you to get a sense of them. So you both agree with it and the board feels good about it and your investors feel good about it. And then it's about, running almost parallel for a while, I think, for about a quarter or so that they have full access to you before, as a founder, you start to slip away, and still being available for a period if you can, but basically doing it little by little. It is important, though, to give that person a lot of space on the day that you hand over officially. You need to remove the kind of organizational connection that many people in the company will have to the founder. Many of them will have known that person for years and will naturally go to them if they've got a problem or a question or an idea. And it's important that that goes away. So it's really important as a founder that if you get any of that inbound, that kind of informal conversational inbound, you sort of always push it back to the new CEO. Not in an abrupt way, not in a rude way, but just sort of back to, back to the question, I'm going to copy X in as well on this topic. And so there's a lot of kind of subtlety in that. But hopefully you have time, and if you do, my advice is to take your time, frankly, both in finding the right person, grooming them for it, and then ultimately doing the handover.
Well, probably from my experience, I haven't seen that many founders stepping. I haven't stepped down yet or stepped up or whatever. I'm keeping my job until I found somebody. Sometimes I wish I could find somebody to replace me and take certain decisions, because you get so busy and knowing every single details, and you think, probably it would be good to give this away in some perspective, or have a distance on it. And I think if ever it would happen, and I think it probably would happen in Antaberry's time, it would be, as a person, and definitely it would be hard for me, but I would be very gladly to see somebody which is either I would trained or somebody I worked with them very closely, that able to step in and doing whatever I've done and better. So definitely if I would do that, I need to hire somebody who's better than me and able to do multitasking. And I would listen to the people surrounding me and seeing my team, how they react towards it. Because the worst things it could happen is collapsing the company with leaving that doors. But yeah.
Okay, so staying with you, Hiba, this question I'm sharing is particularly pertinent since you are the CEO at the moment. It says, the question is, should the person ask himself whether, one, they're prepared to fire their best friend, and two, able to hire, motivate top players who are 20 years older than themselves?
Fire best friend. Well, I think if the person, I fired people, unfortunately, during my time a lot. And I think if the person is not fit for the job, it's definitely need to go. And I think as a CEO, you have to be able to take that decision. And if you can't take that decision, you can't be the person in charge. So if somebody not satisfying, so it doesn't matter, and you shouldn't put kind of, oh, this person my best friend, or this person my colleague, or I worked with them. And the second thing I think is very hard to have a business with best friend and a relative. So if you're trying to keep and channel that out, it's better. And if you're trying not to, it's definitely better, because you don't want to lose your friends and you don't want to lose your relative as well. So I think don't hire them from the first instant. And the second part that you identify, I think stepping down or giving them that part, I think you need to hire the best person for the job, and full stop always.
Right.
Yeah, I think I know what the question is sort of getting at, which is basically that, you know, if you're not willing to make hard decisions, then you shouldn't be a CEO. That's obviously true. Yeah, I mean, as you've just heard from Hiba, she's had to do a number of those things and been able to do them. I don't think your ability to do that changes over time. I think you're either the kind of person who understands that your company is important and therefore you may have to fire someone that you're close to, or you don't. I think if you're already someone who can do that, then you're unlikely to stop being able to do that, if you see what I mean. But it's certainly something that is an interesting evidence point for us as an investor when we meet companies for the first time. Like, has this person had to do difficult things? And it doesn't necessarily have to be these things, but we meet founders who were pursuing really lucrative careers, working for a different company, and who've thrown all of that away because they want to start the company. Things like that are a great sign that you've got someone who could be a great founder. Great.
So carrying on down, there's a question from Andy Honus. Previous one, when should a founder step down? I'll just move down from that one. It says many tech firms fail. Should advisors, investors, I guess, mentors work harder to educate founders on the need to hook up on realism, or even telling them what you're having is great, but it's not a business or something like that? So it's the earlier stage so that they don't even try and become CEOs, I guess. What do you make of that?
So maybe I'll do that one quickly. I mean, yeah, we meet people like that all the time. Because we invest at Series A, by the point we invest, they've usually built some kind of a business. But we meet people much earlier just because it's a fun thing to do, frankly, and because it's a way to help that earlier stage, which ultimately feeds into what we do. And yeah, we meet people like that all the time. And I think that's fine. I think, if you're a smart founder, you don't just live in a vacuum. You come up with interesting ideas and you share them. You come along to something like the Enterprise Hub. I mean, I don't want to advertise it too much, but it's a great example of where the Enterprise Hub is very powerful. You can, hook up with a bunch of very, very smart, in many cases, very commercial engineers and talk about what it is you're trying to do. You can probably find people in the industry that you're looking at disrupting or changing or adding to. And they'll be able to tell you very quickly if they think there's a real business there or not. And then you take that feedback on board, and then you sort of cycle it into your brain, into your process, and figure out whether it's the right thing to do or not. Now, a bit like Hiba said earlier, you take in all that advice, but I still think you should make your own decision, right? Some of the best companies came out of ideas that nobody else would have understood or seen, but the founding team believed and they went for it. So, you should listen to people like that, take that advice on board, but I don't think you have to always follow it. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And then the other thing to sort of think about with all of that is, the part of the question was that a large number of early stage ventures don't work out. I think that's okay. Like, I would much rather, as a society, we all took more risks, but open-minded about the fact that some of those risks won't work out, and be okay with that, and not penalize people for having taken a risk and then failed. That's okay. The problem is more if we're not taking any risks at all. That for me is a big cultural difference between the Bay Area and Europe traditionally, although I think Europe has changed a lot. We've always been much harder on failure over here, and we need to stop being like that, because it's okay to fail. It's way worse to not even try, I think.
I think you're right in terms of failing. In Bay Area, they're more accepting. Actually, if you haven't failed once, you haven't done a good job, and you have to at least fail once. So that is definitely true. And in the UK, we're more and more conservative. And I think as well, the level of investment and what I see from investors and venture capitalists, and I'm not suggesting that is yourself. I think you're identified yourself very different than the norm, but the norm what we see, their timeline is 2 to 5 years, and you have to keep up with that. And always I say, tech companies to growth, if you look how many startups on basically going to year 2, you will lose straight away 20%, 30% in year 1. To get actually to year 7 is only 5% of these tech companies when they started, they get to year 7 and beyond. So it's and it keeps on and on and on for that. So every single year is a milestone for any corporation, but to accept the failures to become part of your learning of progress. And I think in everything we do day to day, we all had probably deals we didn't close, or we failed to close it in somehow, and we have to learn from them. Why did not go on, and why it's not a progress, and what did I do wrong in here? And I'm with you. Yes, definitely listen to everybody decision, but make your own decision is very important. But you have to be, as a CEO, I think, decisive and able to take that decision and just go ahead with it. And of course, is making part of that, you're able to distinguish between, okay, my tech is going to rise certain bar or is going to fail certain bar.
Yeah. But which is much easier to say than it is to do, right? I think that's one of the bits that it's easy to say, just, you just have to make a decision. It's like, well, it can be hard, but I think that's what really makes a difference between a good CEO and a great CEO, is that they can make those calls under pressure.
Very hard. Right, we have a poll. We will have a poll as we finish. We'll carry on chatting, but the poll, Lucy somewhere will orchestrate the poll. Here it is. It appeared on my screen. So you have a choice of 3 answers, plus, I guess, if you don't vote, yet another answer. So the question is, having heard what you heard today, who would you want leading your startup? Not started up, not living there, it's startup. Founder, CEO, either of the two. And if you don't vote, I'll take that as a neither of the two. So please vote away while we carry on with our conversation.
I just realized we can't vote on it.
Yeah, we're not allowed.
We can't vote, yeah. Anyway, we'll see what that comes to. Next couple of questions I can roll into one. Again, Hiba, I'll point to you. There will be situations where the founder wishes to be replaced as CEO. So the question is, what is the scaling skill set which might be attractive? And then Tim Gordon asks, and in the positive sense, how would an incoming CEO need to absorb the culture? What do they have to do to be successful and be loved, I guess, not be out 6 months later?
I think for hiring a CEO, they need to be current. Definitely, they need to be current with what I'm saying about current. They are aware what is going on, and in the tech industry, it doesn't matter what age they are, but knowing and understanding the technical, as a technical company, I think they need to understand the technical, and they're very informed in terms of their education or the way they're related to the subject as well. They have to be passionate about it and actually able to have the same kind of spirit and ambition as you are as a CEO. So to replace that CEO, they have to have the same level or greater than your passion.
Yeah. On the Tim Gordon's question about how to approach company culture, it's probably the one that I can answer best, because I don't have a lot to add to Hiba on her one. It's really hard if there's a traumatic event. I wasn't involved, but one of our CEOs passed away, and we had to replace him, and that's no one goes into any situation hoping to do that, and it's no one wants to ever have to navigate that sort of thing. So these things happen, right? It's reality. There's no easy way in a traumatic case. I think the most important things are a huge degree of transparency and honesty, and then also a realization that it's going to need a lot of commitment from you. So the two things we look for if we're talking to someone who's going to potentially take over as the CEO in a sudden or traumatic event is, first of all, is this person really, really committed to this? Because when you do a takeover like that of the job, you cannot do it remotely. You can't do it half time. You have to be there. You have to spend time with people. You have to realize that it's going to be your job 24/7 rather than 8 hours a day sort of thing for a while you really, really connect to the team and the company and the culture. And you have to immerse yourself into that, even for actually quite a small team, a 20 or 30 person company. It's really a problem once you get to hundreds of people or more. And then the second piece, which I sort of mentioned at the beginning, was transparency and honesty. I think you have to be very, very honest about the fact that you are not the CEO. You're not going to replace him or her. And you're different, and there are some things which you will do better, and be honest about some of the things that you will not be as good at and that you need help on, and kind of exposing some of that fragility and humility is also really important, because it helps people say, right, this person isn't pretending that he or she is going to solve all our problems, but they're going to try, and here's what they're going to be good at. Actually, that could be better than our founder. On these other areas, they need help, and one of us should help them on that. And so I think being very open like that is really hard, but it's hard for a lot of people to do, right? A lot of CEOs fall into this trap of trying to be Superman or Superwoman all the time. And I think employees, particularly smart employees, which is hopefully what you have, see through that immediately. So that's the sort of advice we generally give. But again, it's one of these things that's much easier to say than it is to do.
Okay, we're coming to the back end of our 1 hour slot. I've got the results of the poll. It's not a surprise given the audience. 75% said founder, 12 CEO.
I think that's statistically significant.
Yes, I would definitely agree with it.
Yeah.
Well, the jury is clear, or at least the audience is clear. So, Hiba, thank you very much. Suranga, thank you very much. And one more word about the Royal Academy of Engineering Enterprise Hub. No stake and get it the way it was from senior people with experience. So give that competition a whirl. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.